Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
We're going to get to some more impeachment news, but let's start with this new poll that opened a lot of eyes last night. The latest national Quinnipiac University poll has Mayor Pete Buttigieg surging nationally to second place. Former Vice President Joe Biden hanging on to a lead with 24%. He's up 3 points since last month. But the story of this poll is that Elizabeth Warren's support has been cut in half in just a month, down 14 points since October. She now sits in third place within the margin of error at 14%. Biden leads the field in support among women voters and those over 65 years old. Buttigieg follows in second place with older voters and leads among white voters with no college degree. Donnie, let's keep that up for a second. Elizabeth Warren, the original poll, down 14 points. She was at 28 a month ago, down to 14 right now. Why? Because if you look inside this poll, support for Medicare for all plummeting down to 36% support.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. This country, you can't tell 160 million people you're going to take something away from it that they already have. And I also think the electability thing, I've said this all along, I've taken some heat. I do not think she's electable. I think she would get trounced in a landslide by Trump, but I think people are sensing that. And I also think she has a likability issue. I think her kind of high school principal demeanor, please, this is not a gender thing, this is just kind of tone and manner thing. I think the American public, the more they see, the more they're going, this is not the answer.
Well, actually, she was doing well on her performance out on the campaign trail. It was when she put forth a policy, Steve, that they said, whoa, I don't want 160 million people to lose their health insurance.
I would respectfully slightly disagree with my great friend Donnie on that one. I think she's run a formidable campaign as a person. I think the 70,000 selfies, she's a natural, and it's interesting for someone who's in a classroom until 11 years ago to get out there and perform so well. So I do think it's more your first 2 points. I think the Medicare for all thing is resonating. There was a story, I think, in the Times yesterday, today, about candidates out in the heartland basically saying you can't be for this thing, and I think her electability is a factor as well. But I would want to see another poll. This is one poll showing a very dramatic change.
But it could also be a timing thing with Elizabeth Warren, that she may have peaked a little too early, because she had a really good ground game, as Steve said, and I agree with Donnie on the Medicaid for all certainly hurt her, but that all happened at roughly the same time, and also at a time where the Hunter Biden stuff exploded. Biden was a little bit on getting all the attention. She really, after the debate before the last one, she got crushed on that stage. She was taking fire from everybody. Yeah. So I think it could have been also a timing thing.
I also want to look at some likability numbers. There's a difference between running a good campaign, and I think a lot of our audience right now is shaking their heads at home. I do think there's a likability issue there.
Well, she was, like as I say, she was surging until she officially put out the poll about Medicare for all. Corrine, so Joe Biden, again, after another perceived poor performance at a debate, holding on. Yes, this is a national poll. No, the election is not a national referendum. We know all these things. But he's holding steady at the top there.
Yeah, he's holding steady, and he has been for the last couple of months. A lot of it is the name ID. People know Joe Biden. They like Joe Biden. You have older African Americans who are really holding those numbers pretty steady for him. So it's not surprising. We've been seeing this for several months, even with the gaffes, even with the campaign that he's running. I gotta go back to what Donnie said. Donnie, the likability thing, it's so problematic to hear, because it is always connected to female candidates, women candidates.
Oh, Corrine.
It is. I have not heard likability. Well, I have not heard
Bernie's
it
more unlikable.
with any of the male candidates. You don't hear that type of language.
Bernie
so we
Sanders,
need to be
I put that
very.
as a real title.
I have to just make sure that I flag that and disagree with you on that one. And also electability. Look, Elizabeth Warren, head-to-head, you see Elizabeth Warren, Biden, you've even seen Kamala Harris and others beating Donald Trump. I know it's a head-to-head and it's early, but we have to be mindful on how we talk about this. We got to be really careful. Look, here's the thing. Here's what I'll say about the polling. This is one poll. There's going to be many, many polls. We're still 2 months away from the first person to cast their vote, and it is going to be a wild ride from now until caucus day, Iowa, which will be the first time that voters get to go out there and speak their mind and lay out their vote and caucus for their candidate. And also, if we go back to 2008 or 2012, or if you look at 2008, Hillary Clinton was up by 20 points. Rudy Giuliani was up by 13 points this time. So it is still going to be a very wild ride, and we just have to see. I want to say, like, just ignore the polls for the moment, and we'll see where we are when we get closer.
It is Thursday, the 28th of November of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special on this very special Thanksgiving Day is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, especially on a Thanksgiving Day. Come on. We like to have various regional cuisines on our Thanksgiving table. And so it should be well represented. Looking forward to it. Going to be at my sister's house. She just lives on the other side of the creek. Yeah, there's a big, well, some people call it a river. I call it a creek. The Rogue River is actually a river, though some people might call it a creek. A big creek. Yeah, very big, cold, deep creek. So we're going to go there for the holiday bash. And, of course, she and I are putting up all sorts of dishes. My mom's put up her infamous cranberry concoction and put up some bread stuffing, too. Now, I'm going to put up some bread stuffing. I might add an oyster or two because I like oyster stuffing. We don't put that in the bird, though I have before. And I put up a bread pudding yesterday late. And that, actually, I had a slice of it, and it's quite good. I put Frangelico in it rather than, some people put bourbon, and, you could put really any kind of liqueur. Soak your cranberries and raisins in whatever liqueur that you like. And then, of course, I use the strained liquid that comes out of that soaking right back into the bread pudding. Oh, I do that. Well, I do reserve some for what I call the Italian glaze rather than an anglaise because it has Frangelico in it. It's good. And what else? Oh, what else am I going to put up today? Maybe I'll do some grilled vegetables with a balsamic reduction in it. That's really good, too, on a day like this. Of course, we'll have tamales. My sister and some of her husband, my brother-in-law's family, have been putting up tamales, so we'll have that, too. And, that's just only a part of what we're going to have. I can't wait to get over there to see exactly what it will be. I'll try to take pictures. Yes. Now, of course, I do fear, though this is just humorous speculation on my part. I don't think there's going to be much politics spoken because the only one of the family who is at odds with, reasonable critical thinking is my Trump bro. And I feel bad as a big brother. I went off to school and during his formative years, and I just, I was off doing my own thing. I come back and the guy's like big. So my Trump bro is 5 years younger than me. And let's just say that his educational track was a bit different than what mine was. But regardless, he's gone off in the world and become a millionaire many times over. So good for him. But he does have some conservative, shall we say, political leanings. Admitted a couple of Thanksgivings ago that his political awakening came with Trump. I'm thinking, you're the son of a world-renowned history professor. You had a library that you just could have gone in there and read any book you could have started. At a young age, we all were there. I don't know. I walked precincts. I answered phones. What else? I put up signage. And apparently my brother never did any of that because his political awakening was with Trump. My political awakening really was, to be honest with you, when John Glenn circled the globe. I was in first grade, so I became somewhat aware then that there was a world out there, and I really loved the astronaut thing because of space and all that. But I also came to understand the political ramifications of it. That there was this thing with the Soviets, and we were in a race, and to a little kid that sounded like wow. But my true political awakenings came with, in third grade, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and then it was cemented further 5 years later in 1968 with the assassinations of Martin Luther King and then Bobby Kennedy. So, I was in junior high then. Well on my way to political activism. We were wearing black armbands to protest the war in Vietnam and getting kicked out of school for it. And so my brother didn't do any of that. He fell in with a bad crowd, a bunch of Republicans. I'm sorry, he got rich, so there is that. But so we may have a discussion about the rule of law and law and order. He always talks about law and order. Law and order, law and order. And I'm like about the rule of law. Well, apparently the rule of law is some sort of democratic fantasy that we just made up. Just like high crimes and misdemeanors. That's making the rounds in the right-wing fever swamp. They claim that high crimes and misdemeanors is a made-up concept by we Democrats, and it's not really in the Constitution. And if it is, that's because we photoshopped it in. Because can you imagine, as just an aside, talking about Photoshop, because this is all part of a whole, can you imagine being the poor intern? You know, you're thinking, wow, I'm on my way and I'm learning all the great things right here in the White House. And one of your tasks is to Photoshop Trump's head onto Rocky Balboa's body and then put it on social media for everybody to see. Boy, welcome to the deep state, huh? Jeez. No wonder they think it. They think that, well, we do this all the time, so they must be doing it. And worse, too. That's actually how they think. I've heard that justification from my Republican friend business owners who go right to the public trough and bleed it dry because their attitude is that, well, I'm a good person, and if I'm doing this, all these bad people must be doing it worse. And who are the bad people? Yeah, you and me. I don't know. Have you taken any largesse from the government to run a business and then spend the money differently than what it was allotted for or allocated for? Who does that? Yeah, I know. Money allocated to Ukraine, you're going to do something else with it. No. And that's what I mean by the rule of law versus law and order. Because the law and order crowd says we make up the law and you better follow our orders or else. All right. So lots going on. Caches of weaponry have been confiscated in various cities. Rocket launchers. Because I guess people are afraid that the Democrats might actually kick this guy out, win an election, and then we're going to have vast amounts of socialism, just like the Eisenhower policies that the Birchers hated back in the day. Because apparently the kids of the Birchers are pretty much in the wheelhouse and levering the levers of power. Apparently. Well, we could go on and on and on. But it is Thanksgiving, so I guess we could. But we do have a curated show for you today. We took the time to do it. And so we will. And, of course, starting off at the top, Yeah, leave it to Donnie Deutsch to whine. It's not that I don't like Warren because she's a woman. Yeah, I know, Donnie. It's because of all that pharma, not farmer. Pharma, big pharma stocks that you have. And maybe that's the reason you can't stand Elizabeth Warren. Donnie Deutsch. Yeah, well, I'm glad that she put him in his place. Though, he's probably going to say she's not likable either, and not because she's a black woman. Not because of that. On the rest of the menu, ICE set up a fake university, collected millions of dollars in tuition from legal visa holders, and then deported them for visa violations when the scam was revealed. Well, let me just put it in a thumbnail sketch here for you. ICE lured these kids in, collected money, and then deported them because they were part of a fake university that they set up. ICE set up, and they kept the money. And apparently no one is sued because I guess maybe they don't know that you can sue to get your money back. Kind of hard to do when you're from a poor village in the North Punjab region of India. Feature, not a bug. The Trump organization has been caught using Trump Tower in a tax scam. Well, we have suspected this, but now we have the documents. And William Ruckelshaus, who resigned as Deputy Attorney General in Watergate Saturday Night Massacre, has died at the age of 87. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Australia's second largest bank, Westpac, will refund monies to people who bought new shares before a money laundering bombshell hit. We'll see if that saves them. We'll see. And Australia prepares for a tough summer of fires, droughts, and heat waves. Just don't call it climate change. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page our chat room link, deftly located by Superior Graphic Design, right there by the social media scroll. Now, if you would take a gander to the leftish of the page, you will find another link deftly located by that Superior Graphic Design, and that Superior Graphic Design is done by Tom, and we thank Tom. And we should also thank Kelly for monitoring the chat room. And she's at the Macy's Day Parade today, and I think there might be some sort of reportage going on, at least on social media. So look out for that. I'll get it out. It's the holidays. Okay, our Patreon link that Tom deftly located there to the leftish of the page, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is put there because we are unable to sustain this endeavor without your help. And we are very thankful for your generosity. We've been doing this for 8 years, 24/7, 365 broadcasting. And you'd be amazed that we're able to do this. But it's because we have a duty, and our civic duty says we must resist. And in times of plenty, we should still be there to, maybe question the dominant paradigm, and make damn sure that there's due process and equal protection for all, and the only way that can be effected is if it is known about. And that's why we try to do what we do. And we are able to do that because of you. And that's because many of you Many of you have sent the cost of an espresso type coffee drink our way, and we've been able to use that and pay our bills, at least the majority of them. Put a big dent into it, let's put it that way. And we are also in the process of at least changing out some machinery. I got software that's going to go out in January, and I won't be able to upgrade the PC to a newer operating system because there's just not enough room for it. It's that old. So thank you for your generosity in allowing us to be able to put some money aside to buy the newish machinery and pay our fixed costs, which are bills. Thank you very much. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that too. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that out on social media so people can find it on social media. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Alrighty. Let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thanksgiving Day special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Comes out of the Detroit Free Press, and I got to tell you, this story burns me up. About 250 additional foreign students of a fake university in Metro Detroit, created by the Department of Homeland Security, have been arrested in recent months. So that's a total of 250. It was 90 additional, so that brings it to a total of 250 have been arrested since January on immigration violations by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, as part of a sting operation by federal agents who enticed foreign-born students, mostly from India, to attend the school that marketed itself as offering graduate programs in technology and computer studies. Many of those arrested have been deported to India, while others are contesting their removals. One has been allowed to stay after being granted lawful permanent resident status by an immigration judge. The students had arrived legally in the U.S. on student visas. But since the University of Farmington was later revealed to be a creation of federal agents, they lost their immigration status when the university was shut down in January. And then ICE went about going through their records and arresting all those kids for violating immigration rules because you can't join a fake university. This university, quote, put out information that it was accredited and set up back channel other links so that when you went to check that out, it was supposedly true. I would think that this is a criminal enterprise right up in the alley in the wheelhouse of a Donald J. Trump. And I would expect that if there was really the rule of law, instead of I make the law and you follow the order, there would be people actually going to jail. Desai Martin of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Thanksgiving Day special Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. New documents uncovered by ProPublica and published yesterday, Wednesday, show discrepancies in how the Trump Organization reported occupancy rates at Trump Tower to potential lenders and tax officials. In 2011 and 2012, the Trump Organization told potential lenders that the occupancy rate of Trump Tower was significantly higher than the Trump Organization reported to New York City property tax officials. ProPublica used a combination of open record laws and publicly available information to reveal the discrepancies, which apparently are going to be top secret now. They're going to have to put all that stuff on the top secret server that Trump has been putting all of his crimes in, really, so people can't find them out because they're top secret. The Trump Organization told the lender that Trump Tower specifically had an occupancy rate of roughly 99%. Excuse me, but I took hotel restaurant management when I was undergrad. In fact, I even interned at the facility in the Grand Canyon that the Kellogg Foundation owns because I went to Cal Poly Pomona and took classes with the guy who actually wrote the text on hotel restaurant management, and his name is Lundberg. There is not a hotel in the world anywhere that has 99% occupancy. Give me a break. But in January of 2012, the Trump Organization told tax authorities that the building had an 83% occupancy rate. Wow. So you mean you had about 85 to 88% occupancy and they had to lie about that? Now I got to tell you, 83 to 88, that's pretty good. Okay. ProPublica reported that there are tax incentives for a company to report vacant space to tax authorities. Conversely, lenders look more favorably upon properties with high occupancy rates. Well, two sets of books. Experts told ProPublica there could be legitimate reasons for such discrepancies, saying that a small portion of the 2012 difference appeared justified. However, the size of the discrepancies alarmed some financial experts. Nancy Wallace, a professor of finance and real estate at the University of California at Berkeley, where I just happened to learn about real estate, that the discrepancies were versions of fraud. And Kevin Reardon, a financial or financing expert and former accountant, said he was unable to give an explanation for the discrepancies even after reviewing the tax and loan records. I should say I didn't take classes at the University of Berkeley or Cal Berkeley in real estate. I learned about the market in the Berkeley Hills. You can learn a lot. Also in the Flatlands, too. And if you've ever been in the Bay Area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In 2012, the Trump Organization refinanced a $27 million Trump Tower debt with a $100 million loan, pocketing the additional cash. The Trump Organization did respond to a request for comment. However, in a comment to ProPublica, the Trump Organization argued that the comparing of various reports is comparing apples to oranges because requirements of what must be reported to each entity are different. Well, according to the law, an organization submitting false filings can face fines and or criminal charges. Apparently, anonymous worker bees at Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. William Ruckelshaus, picked by Richard Nixon as the first head of the EPA and as Deputy Attorney General before being fired for defying Nixon in the Watergate scandal, died yesterday, Wednesday, at the age of 87. Ruckelshaus, a moderate Republican, highly regarded for his integrity and seen as a white knight by the environmental community, died at his home in Seattle, according to the New York Times, citing his daughter, Mary Ruckelshaus. In what was known as the Saturday Night Massacre in October of 1973, Ruckelshaus, then Deputy Attorney General, and his boss, Attorney General Elliot Richardson, resigned rather than carry out Nixon's order to fire Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, who was pursuing recordings of conversations that eventually brought down Nixon's presidency. Cox was fired by the Solicitor General, Robert Bork, igniting an outcry over the Watergate scandal that eventually forced Nixon to resign in August of 1974 rather than face removal from office by Congress. I should remind folks that Robert Bork was up for a Supreme Court seat because of the great heroic work of firing Archibald Cox and doing Nixon's bidding. But the outcry was so great, we ended up with Clarence Thomas instead. I don't know, sometimes you don't want to get what you wish for now, do you? Well, it wouldn't have been any better with Bork. When you accept a presidential appointment, you must remind yourself there are lines over which you will not step. Lines impossible to define in advance, but nevertheless always present, Ruckelshaus said in a 2012 speech in Seattle. In this case, the line was bright, and the decision was simple. Ruckelshaus was the first administrator of the EPA, created in 1970. He later noted that 16 major pieces of environmental legislation were enacted during Nixon's years in office. When visibly filthy air and water forced action, it wasn't only visibly filthy air, you could feel it right down in your lungs. Citizens were demanding something be done, and government was responding. Wow. Government working? The White House shifted Ruckelshaus in 1973 to acting director of the FBI and then deputy attorney general, plugging gaps as the Watergate scandal engulfed the Nixon administration. Ruckelshaus returned to private law practice after leaving the Justice Department, but in 1983, the Reagan administration brought him back to run the embattled EPA. After then, Administrator Ann Gorsuch, mother of Neil, and a number of her top aides resigned amid allegations of mismanagement and conflicts of interest. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree now, does it? Ruckelshaus was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, by President, the last one we had, Barack Obama in 2015. Obama said Ruckelshaus spent his life putting country before party or politics. He reminds us how noble public service can be, and our air and water is cleaner, and our lives are brighter because of William Ruckelshaus. Well, that takes us to our break period, which we better do. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, The Little Woman. Slight spoilers. Martin Scorsese was recently asked why his film's protagonists have been mainly men. Failing to answer the question, he said instead, and I paraphrase, that if a story doesn't call for a lead female character, then shoehorning one in ends up being a waste of everyone's time. Well, now Scorsese begs the question that follows the question he did not answer. What do we do then when movie makers produce so many stories that don't call for women characters? You leave them out, as Martin suggests, that's so many women not on screen. Well, here's my suggestion. Work them in. Write characters for women that aren't a waste of time. Director James Mangold's Ford vs. Ferrari is about race car designer and businessman Carroll Shelby and designer and driver Ken Miles. From 1963 to 66, they worked for Ford Motors to juice the company and unseat Ferrari's racing dominance. The movie is written by brothers Jez and John Henry Butterworth and also by Jason Keller. It stars Matt Damon, Christian Bale, and what the heck is Catriona Balfe doing in this movie? Did she win consecutive People's Choice Awards for playing the lead in Outlander to lean on Christian Bale, look pretty, and do little else? At least she's not the fraught wife whose domestic priorities are her man's obstacle. Instead, she plays her flip side, the ultra-supportive wife, but in a really superficial way. She's there for a caress, a kiss, a meal at the right time, and a patient acceptance of the crap her husband pulls that drives everyone else mad. Where is the meat to their relations? Why does Ken have more scenes where he shares his core beliefs and dreams with his son than with his wife? I mean, even at the end, Matt Damon plays the film's final button in Carroll Shelby's big emotional moment, not with the adult wife of his best friend, but with this same 11-year-old boy. And I get it, Ford vs. Ferrari is not about Molly Miles. But I look and I think this is not a case of a story with no place for this character. This is a case of a character who has been placed out of this story. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Modern painters usually get art supplies from a store. You want red paint, you buy red paint. But thousands of years ago, indigenous artists in what went on to become British Columbia actually cooked a slurry of aquatic bacteria to produce their distinctive red paints.
Well, yeah, it was a long time ago. There was no, there were no art stores. But yeah, that's what really got us interested in exploring it further because it was just such a complex series of steps to produce this paint.
Brandy McDonald. She works in archaeological science at the University of Missouri Research Reactor. That's a nuclear reactor used for studies in a wide variety of disciplines. The paint McDonald examined was on a fragment of ancient rock art from central British Columbia. Indigenous artists there had used a distinctive ochre pigment to paint rocks with designs of otters, fish, caribou, beavers, and canoes. Under an electron microscope, McDonald saw tiny tubules in the paint, structures produced by a particular microbe, and that tipped her off that the iron oxide pigment might be of biological origin. She later determined the pigment was produced by the aquatic bacterium Leptothrix acracia.
It kind of floats as this like brownish, auburn, orangish algal mat, like at the surfaces of little freshwater streams. And so it takes iron out of, iron-enriched water and uses that to produce energy to grow these little colonies.
But the substance wasn't just straight bacterial paint. The microscopic structure looked like it was cooked, too, to make the pigment more durable and color-fast. To test that idea, McDonald and her team actually went out and gathered mats of this bacterium from a stream in Maine. They heated it under the electron microscope, and they saw that the materials in the pigment crystallized, changes they'd also seen in the original sample, and that would make the paint more resistant to breaking down. The results and links to incredible videos of that bubbling, cooking pigment are in the journal Scientific Reports. McDonald's team is now working with indigenous communities in central British Columbia to learn more about the history of rock art there and how it was produced, and to share these new microscopic insights into this ancient art. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the third trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seat belts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seat belts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
$234,000 voters in Wisconsin are at risk of being thrown off the voting rolls. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. As reported by the Associated Press, quote, more than 234,000 Wisconsin voters would be unable to cast their ballots in next year's election or the primaries unless they register again before those elections. The reason? Voters who may or may not have moved receive a postcard from the state asking them to confirm their address. A lawsuit filed by a conservative law firm, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, insists that voters who do not respond to the postcard within 30 days must be thrown off the voting rolls. The Wisconsin Elections Commission, in contrast, says no. They have 2 years to respond to that postcard. Voter eligibility, for the most part, is a matter decided under state law, and this lawsuit is in state court. The people who would be most affected by the 30-day mandate are, of course, those who move, young people and poor people who have to move more often. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, in response to the lawsuit, said, quote, we should spend our time in making it easier for people to vote rather than making it more difficult. I'm hopeful that the lawsuit is thrown out. Oh, yes, the 234,000 voters, well, that's a consequential number in Wisconsin, a state that President Donald Trump won in 2016 by 23,000 votes. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1891. That was the day the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union began in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time of the union's founding, the field of electrical work was very new. Linemen often risked their lives for their jobs. They worked on high power lines, sometimes as long as 12 hours a day. They worked in all sorts of weather, typically earning as little as 15 to 20 cents an hour. In 1890, an exposition was held in St. Louis to showcase a glorious display of electrical wonders. The exposition brought together electrical workers from throughout the United States. At the end of their work each day, the men would gather and talk. They shared stories of their hard work under dangerous and unsafe conditions. They decided it was time to form a union. They reached out to the American Federation of Labor. The AFL sent an organizer named Charles Castle to help them. Soon, local number 5221 of the Electrical Wiremen and Linemen's Union was established in St. Louis. But the men knew they had to reach beyond St. Louis. They elected lineman Harry Miller as their president. They then sent him traveling by railroad boxcar to cities like Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Milwaukee. Miller helped linemen in these cities organize their own local unions. Delegates from 10 locals, representing less than 300 members, gathered in St. Louis. It was there that they drafted a constitution and adopted a logo, the iconic image of a clenched fist holding 2 lightning bolts. And with that, the IBEW was born. Today, the union represents approximately 250,000 members and is a true spark for the labor movement.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Thursday, November 28th, 2019. I'm Mark Boulanger. Labor leaders from all around the world are attending a major conference on social protection in Geneva this week. Social protection programs are government systems such as pensions and unemployment insurance. Safety nets, on the other hand, focus on the very basic needs such as food and shelter. One of the labor leaders attending the conference is the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, Sharon Burrow. Ms. Burrow was interviewed at the conference by Adam Bowers.
So Sharon Burrow, General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, thank you very much for joining us. My pleasure. We've got a few questions for you this morning on social protection. And you've said in the past that we need to go beyond creating safety nets and build fully comprehensive social protection systems. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Well, safety nets don't work. They may work on top of a basic social protection system. So if you see issues for families or issues for individuals, then you can always add some sort of public service commitment. But if you don't have a universal social protection system, then people have no sense of security. And as the world becomes more uncertain, that's even more important today. But it makes sense too, because when people have that security, when they don't have an income from work, or it's a pension when your partner dies or you retire, or it's indeed all of the other elements along the way with family protection and the like, then it creates a basic economy. So workers and their families have security, you have a basic economy, and people feel like there's hope.
And you talked there about the issue of security. Now, the declaration, the centenary declaration of the ILO for a fair future of work, a human-centred future of work, talks about renewing the social contract. How do we go about renewing that social contract at a time when we're seeing growing inequalities, greater poverty, and more insecurity?
Well, it's absolutely fundamental. The ITC calls for a new social contract or a renewed social contract. And if you introduce the ILO centenary declaration, then you'll go a long way to re-establishing that. We have 60% of the world's labour market now works informally, and that includes new platform businesses. So that sense of insecurity is enormous. And when you see people in the streets all over the world for a variety of reasons, it's not the policy around climate, or it's not the issue around peace that's worrying people. it's actually their insecurity. Of course, they want peace and democracy, they want a clean environment, but if you don't have a labour protection floor, which is the centrepiece for us of the ILO Centenary Declaration, then you don't have those guarantees. So fundamental rights, occupational health and safety, an adequate or evidence-based minimum wage, and maximum hours of work. And when you marry that with social protection, then you have a floor for people to know that there's dignity in work, that they have the support of the government to whom they pay taxes, and their families have hope for a better future.
And as you say, the world of work is transforming. We're seeing different economies coming through, digital economy, but also more informal work. How do we ensure that these workers are protected, have their rights protected, receive social protection? Is there something that needs to happen with representation? Do trade unions need to transform as well as the economy?
Well, for us it's about just transition. And trade unions around the world are actually organising everybody, people in the informal economy, people in platform business, people in traditional areas of work. And the supply chains, of course, are a fundamental issue for us because the way that the current economic model is constructed is already a model of dehumanising exploitation. When you actually have insecurity, low wage, often unsafe work, and no rules of the game, add to that informality, no minimum wage, no rule of law, then you have a situation that's a disaster in terms of any sense of security. Even more important if you are displaced for periods of time because of technology or the disasters of climate, which is why we talk about just transition.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays on this especially special Thanksgiving Day. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. We had quite a bit of precipitation, some snow. Let's see here. Yes, there is still some snow up in the hills, a mere 100 feet or so above where the mothership resides. Will be cloudy conditions for most of the day, though generally sunny skies in the late afternoon. Highs will be around 42. Overnight lows in the mid to low 20s because we will have clear skies. Winds will be light and variable, and then sunny skies tomorrow with a high of about 43, and winds will remain light and variable. And then Saturday, Sunday, and it looks like for the next 3 or 4 or 5 days or more, winds will pick up somewhat out of the east-southeast and bringing copious amounts of water. Some days we may be getting a third or more of an inch of rain, pretty much about a quarter of an inch and below for most days. So I guess we'll look forward to that. Right now, it looks like pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 19 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.73 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 50 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 55 and cloudy. Rome is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 32 and cloudy. Kabul is 36 and fair. Hong Kong is 61 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 41 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 69 and mostly cloudy, mixed with some smoke, I presume. San Francisco, California is 41 and partly cloudy. And New York is 52 and mostly cloudy. And I think there's some wind, and they're not going to be able to have the balloons on the Macy's Day Parade. Darn. Well, that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Brian Kay of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Australia's Westpac Banking Corp offered to refund people who bought new shares weeks before a lawsuit accusing it of millions of breaches of money laundering laws, a move some investors said was to fend off criticism about its transparency. The country's oldest and second largest bank has been in crisis since the financial crime watchdog Austrac last week accused it of enabling 23 million payments in violation of anti-money laundering laws, including between known child exploiters. The scandal has already seen out the bank's CEO, chairman of its and head of its compliance committee, and large investors and their proxies have called for more heads to roll. At Westpac's general meeting this December 12th, on Thursday, the lender said it would pay back retail shareholders who bought 500 million Australian, which pens out to 340 million US, of new stock 2 weeks earlier, giving no reason for the move other than to say it came after talks with corporate regulator, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. In other words, they got caught.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
And even more anonymous worker bees from Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Australia's fire and drought-ravaged east will suffer continued hot and dry conditions this summer, Australia being in the southern hemisphere, of course, increasing the chances of severe weather events, the country's Weather Bureau said. The Bureau of Meteorology warned the country could expect more heat waves and little rain in the east during this summer, which runs from December through February, following one of the driest springs ever. We've already seen significant bushfire activity during spring, and the outlook for drier and warmer than average conditions will maintain that heightened risk over the coming months, the head of long-range forecasts, Andrew Watkins, said. The hot, dry spring led to an early start to Australia's bushfire season, with people killed and more than 500 homes destroyed since September, and fire authorities have warned that there is worse to come. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And yes, we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Yes, we will. And you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. It's going to have a mix of regular and holiday programming beginning today and through the weekend with some residual on Monday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all that breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.